Get him out! Marcus Chen's voice cracked through the Magnolia Room like a whip. His face was crimson, spit flying as he jabbed his finger toward the entrance. Get this filthy vagrant out of my restaurant now! Two security guards seized the old man by his arms. He didn't fight, just let himself be dragged backward, his worn boots scraping across the polished marble. Sir, please, I just need... The elderly man's voice was soft, almost apologetic. I don't care what you need. Marcus advanced, his Italian loafers clicking against the floor. We have a 3-star general arriving in 15 minutes. I will not have this trash in my establishment. The guards yanked harder. The old man stumbled. Then his jacket tore. Rap! Something tumbled from the frayed pocket, a small velvet box, navy blue, bouncing once before sliding across the marble floor like a puck on ice. The entire restaurant froze. The box glided between shocked diners, past the hostess stand, spinning slightly as it traveled. 20 feet, 30 feet, cutting a path straight toward the entrance. The front door swung open. A gust of wind caught the box. The lid popped. Clink. A medal of honor spilled onto the white marble. Gold star gleaming, pale blue ribbon spreading like wings. The crystal chandeliers above caught every facet, making it glow like a fallen piece of heaven. The box came to rest at a pair of black leather shoes. Military shine. Not a scuff mark visible. Every eye in the room followed the polished shoes upward. Sharply creased trousers, Army service uniform, ribbons covering the chest, 3 silver stars on each shoulder. General Raymond Anderson stood in the doorway, staring down at the medal at his feet. His hand, steady, deliberate, reached down and lifted the velvet box. Inside the lid, protected by yellowed plastic, was a photograph. 7 young men in combat fatigues, arms around each other, jungle backdrop. Mekong Delta, 1968. The general's fingers tightened around the box, his jaw clenched, his eyes lifted, past the frozen diners, past Marcus Chen's white face, past the trembling hostess, and locked on to the old man still held between the 2 guards, torn clothes, matted beard, weathered skin, and there, on the left side of his face, a crescent-shaped scar running from temple to jaw. The general's breath caught. The old man lifted his head. His eyes, deep brown, still sharp beneath decades of hardship, met the general's gaze. Something passed between them, something wordless, something forged in fire. The silence was absolute. Marcus Chen tried to speak. General Anderson, I can explain. But the general didn't hear him. He took 1 step forward, then another. The Medal of Honor cradled in his palm like something sacred. His lips parted. His voice came out as a broken whisper. My God, it can't be. The room held its breath, and in that frozen moment, with a Medal of Honor lying between a 3-star general and a homeless man in rags, the entire world waited to see what would happen next. Sometimes, the greatest heroes hide themselves in the humblest of clothes. If you believe that justice always arrives in its own time, press subscribe now to witness the moment when truth is finally revealed. What happens when the powerful meet those they've forgotten? This is just the beginning. 3 days earlier, dawn had not yet broken when Elijah Thompson opened his eyes beneath the Piedmont Avenue overpass. Cold concrete above, colder concrete below. The rumble of early morning traffic shook the ground like distant thunder. This had been home for 8 years now, ever since the VA checks stopped coming and the little apartment on Auburn Avenue became just another thing he'd lost. Elijah sat up slowly, his back screaming in protest. 79 years old. Every morning felt like waking up at the bottom of a well, trying to climb out with bones that didn't want to cooperate anymore. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a plastic sandwich bag. Inside, protected from the rain and the dirt and everything else the streets could throw at him, was a photograph. A woman in a yellow dress. 1965. Her smile could light up a room. Still could, even through the faded color and creased edges. "Good morning, Mary," Elijah whispered. He'd spoken to her every morning for 15 years, ever since the hospice, ever since she'd squeezed his hand one last time, and gone somewhere he couldn't follow. 3 more days, sweetheart. His fingertip traced the outline of her face. 3 more days, and we'll have our dinner. Just like I promised. 60 years. 60 years since they'd stood together at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and he'd promised to love her until death parted them. Death had parted them. But promises didn't die. He tucked the photograph away and reached into his other pocket, the cloth pouch where he kept his money. 6 weeks of collecting cans. 6 weeks of odd jobs and spare change, and refusing to spend a single dollar on anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. He poured the contents into his palm. 3 $5 bills, soft from handling, 6 singles, some taped back together, a handful of quarters, dimes, nickels, 3 pennies. His hands trembled as he counted. $23.47. The Magnolia Room required $25 for 2 meals. Their table by the window, the roasted chicken with herbs that Mary used to love. 1 hour of pretending the world hadn't forgotten them both. $1.53 short. Elijah stared at his hands in the growing light. They were darker than they should be. Grime that gas station soap couldn't fully wash away. The knuckles were swollen with arthritis. The fingernails cracked and yellowed. These hands had once carried an M16 through the Mekong Delta, had pulled 3 wounded men through a mile of killing fire. Had cradled Mary's face on their wedding night. Now they picked through trash looking for aluminum cans worth 5 cents each. 31 cans. That's what he needed. His stomach clenched. A deep, hollow growl that reminded him he hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Sister Roberts at the Peachtree Church had given him 2 biscuits and coffee, had called him baby the way his mother used to. He could go back there now, fill his belly, make the hunger stop. But the cans wouldn't collect themselves. Elijah returned the money to its pouch and struggled to his feet. His knees popped. His back sent lightning up his spine. He gripped the concrete pillar and waited for the dizziness to pass. "Hunger is temporary," he said aloud, "but a promise is forever." Mary used to say that, when he'd work double shifts to save for her birthday. When he'd skip meals so they could go to the movies, she'd scold him, smiling, and call him foolish. Then she'd kiss him anyway. Because she knew. Real love wasn't the easy moments. Real love was the choice you made when it cost you something. Elijah bent down and rolled up his sleeping bag. Torn. Found behind a sporting goods store 3 years back. He tucked it into his canvas bag along with his few possessions. Spare socks, a bar of soap, a water-damaged Bible, and the velvet box he never opened but always carried. Inside that box was a Medal of Honor, presented by President Johnson in 1969. Extraordinary heroism, the citation said. Selfless sacrifice, above and beyond the call of duty. That medal used to open doors, used to earn handshakes and respect and the kind of looks that told him he mattered. Now it was just weight in his pocket, a reminder of a man the world no longer recognized. Elijah stepped out from beneath the overpass into the pale morning light. The city rushed past him, cars full of people with jobs and lives and purposes. None of them saw him. He was invisible, just another homeless man, just another problem to look away from. That was fine. He wasn't doing this for them. He adjusted the canvas bag on his shoulder and started his slow walk toward the recycling center on Memorial Drive. His stomach growled again, louder this time, more insistent. He ignored it. 31 cans between him and a promise kept. 31 cans between him and one more dinner with his Mary. "I'm coming, sweetheart," he whispered to the photograph pressed against his heart. 3 more days. Just like I promised. And he began searching the gutters for aluminum that someone else had thrown away. Elijah stood across the street from the Magnolia Room, staring at the polished brass fixtures and white columns that framed the entrance. The burgundy awning stretched over the sidewalk like it was protecting something precious from the ordinary world outside. He looked down at himself. Torn jacket, stained pants, boots held together with duct tape. When was the last time he'd had a real shower? The church bathroom sink could only do so much. For a moment, doubt whispered in his ear. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe he should just... No. He'd made a promise. Elijah touched the plastic bag inside his jacket where Mary's photograph waited. "I'm here, sweetheart. Just like I said." He crossed the street. Through the glass door, he could see controlled chaos inside, waitstaff rushing between tables, a young hostess adjusting flower arrangements. And in the center of it all, a man in an expensive suit barked orders, his face tight with stress. "Move those chrysanthemums to the left. Someone polish that wine glass again. I can see a fingerprint." Elijah pulled the door open. The small bell chimed. Marcus Chen's head snapped toward the sound. His eyes landed on Elijah, and his expression curdled. "Oh, absolutely not." Marcus crossed the dining room in quick strides. "We're closed. Private event." "I called yesterday," Elijah said quietly. "I have a reservation. 2 o'clock. Thompson, we don't..." Marcus's eyes traveled from Elijah's face, down to his duct-taped boots, then back up. His lip curled. "Sir, this establishment has standards. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I have money." Elijah pulled out the cloth pouch, showing the crumpled bills. $25. For 2 meals. Marcus didn't even glance at the money. "Do you see this?" He gestured around the pristine dining room, the crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the polished silverware. "In 30 minutes, General Raymond Anderson walks through that door. 3-star general, decorated war hero, important people." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I will not have some homeless vagrant stinking up my restaurant when military brass arrives. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Behind Marcus, the young hostess, Sarah, shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes met Elijah's for just a moment. Sympathy flickered there, but she said nothing. "Table 7, Elijah said, his voice steady despite the shame burning in his chest. "By the window. It's my anniversary." "I don't care if it's your birthday, Christmas, and the second coming all rolled into one." Marcus positioned himself between Elijah and the dining room like a wall. "Look at yourself. You're filthy. You smell like the street. You want to sit here? Today? While I'm entertaining a real hero?" The words landed like a fist to the gut. Real hero. "I served," Elijah said quietly. "I'm sure you did." Marcus's tone made it clear he didn't believe it, or didn't care. "And I'm sure there's a VA shelter somewhere that'll take you in. But this?" He gestured at the elegant space around them. "This is for people who made something of themselves. Sir, maybe we could..." Sarah started to speak. "Back to your station, Sarah. Now." Marcus didn't even look at her. The young woman retreated, her face flushed. Marcus turned back to Elijah, his eyes cold. "Let me make this simple. General Anderson is a man who's earned his place in society, a man who commands respect, a man who—" He paused, his gaze sweeping over Elijah's torn clothes one more time. "A man who didn't end up sleeping under bridges." Elijah's hands tightened around the cloth pouch. Inside was every penny he'd collected for 3 days, every can he'd picked from the garbage, every moment of hunger he'd endured, all for a promise, all for Mary. "I just want to sit at my table," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have a table here. Not anymore." Marcus's voice was final. "Whatever you used to be, whatever you think you were, that's not who's standing in front of me now. What I see is a vagrant who's going to drive away my most important client." He snapped his fingers toward the back of the restaurant. "Security!" 2 large men in dark suits began moving toward the entrance. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Elijah stood perfectly still, the cloth pouch clutched in his weathered hands, the photograph of Mary pressed against his heart. And for just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not even hurt, just a deep, bone-tired sadness. The kind that comes from a world that only remembers you when you're useful and forgets you the moment you're not. "Please," Elijah said one last time. "It's just one meal." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Get him out of here." The security guard's hands clamped down on Elijah's arms. "Wait!" Sarah rushed forward, positioning herself between the guards and the door. Her face was flushed, her voice urgent but quiet. "Marcus, please. If they drag him out, he might fight. It'll be loud. Right when General Anderson arrives." She spoke quickly, desperately. "Just let him sit in the back. He'll eat and leave in 20 minutes. No scene." Marcus glanced at his watch. 28 minutes until the general's arrival. He looked at Elijah, standing perfectly still, not resisting, just waiting with a dignity that somehow made everything worse. "Fine." Marcus's voice was ice. He pointed toward the far corner. "Table 12, by the kitchen doors. But if he makes one sound, if he so much as breathes too loud, you're fired. Understood?" Sarah nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." "Thank you." The guards released Elijah. Sarah gestured toward the back. "This way, sir." Elijah followed her through the dining room, past the elegant tables with their white linens and flowers, past the large windows where afternoon sunlight made everything glow. Table 7, his table, Mary's table, sat empty by the window. Perfect light, garden view. That's where they'd sat on their 25th anniversary. But Sarah led him past it, past the good tables, past the windows, past the light, to the very back corner. Table 12 sat wedged between the swinging kitchen doors and the restroom entrance. Every few seconds, the doors burst open with a bang as waiters rushed through. Harsh, fluorescent light spilled out. The air smelled like bleach and dish soap. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "This is all I could do." Elijah looked back toward the window where he should have been sitting, where Mary should have been across from him, but he was here, in the shadows, next to the toilets. "It's all right, child." His voice was soft. "Thank you for your kindness." Sarah pulled out her order pad. "What can I get for you?" Elijah reached into his jacket and withdrew the cloth pouch. He counted out the bills carefully, wrinkled, stained, some taped together, and laid them on the table. The roasted chicken with herbs, he said. For two. Sarah's pen hesitated. For two? Elijah reached into his jacket again and withdrew the plastic bag. He carefully removed Mary's photograph and placed it on the table across from him, propping it against the salt shaker. Mary smiled at him from 1965. Yellow dress, bright eyes, forever young. For two, Elijah confirmed quietly. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. She understood. The anniversary, the empty chair, the reason this mattered. Her eyes filled with tears. "I'll bring it right out, sir." Her voice cracked. She turned to leave, then paused. "What's her name?" "Mary. My wife. 60 years today. She's beautiful. She was the most beautiful woman God ever created." Sarah hurried toward the kitchen, wiping her eyes. Elijah sat alone in the shadows. The kitchen doors banging beside him, the smell of cleaner stinging his nose. This wasn't the window table. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. But he was here, and Mary's photograph sat across from him. And that was enough. 10 minutes passed. The kitchen doors kept swinging. A customer walked past to the restroom, glanced at Elijah, and wrinkled their nose. Elijah didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on Mary's smile. The kitchen doors swung open. Sarah emerged with a tray. She set down the roasted chicken, perfectly golden, herbs glistening, steam rising, and beside it a bowl of soup he hadn't ordered. "The soup is on the house," Sarah whispered, glancing nervously toward Marcus. "You look like you could use it." Elijah stared at the bowl. Tomato bisque, rich and red and smelling like heaven. His stomach clenched with fierce hunger. When was the last time he'd eaten? Yesterday morning. "I can't accept, please." Sarah's eyes met his. "Let me do this one thing." Elijah nodded slowly. "Thank you, child. God bless you." Sarah smiled, warm and genuine. "My grandmother was like you. After my grandfather passed, she'd set his place every Sunday. Said love doesn't die just because someone's gone." She squeezed his shoulder gently and walked away. Elijah picked up the spoon, his hand trembling, from hunger, from emotion, from the simple grace of a stranger's kindness. He was about to take a sip when he heard footsteps. Marcus appeared at the table, his face twisted with disgust. He stared at the crumpled bills, the money that had cost 3 days of searching through garbage. "Filthy." Marcus picked up one bill between two fingers. "Sarah, get over here." Sarah hurried over, her face pale. "Yes, sir?" "How long have you been working here?" 3 months, sir." "And you haven't learned that we don't coddle vagrants?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. "I don't pay you to waste expensive soup on—" He gestured at Elijah with contempt. "This." Sarah's hands twisted together. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen. It won't happen again." "You're right. It won't. Because if I see you being nice to him again, if I see you spend one more second at this table than necessary, you're finished. Clear?" "Yes, sir." "Now get back to work. The general arrives in 15 minutes. Sarah walked away, shoulders slumped. Elijah watched her go, something stirring inside him, something old, something that had been sleeping for years. He'd spent 15 years invisible. 15 years enduring insults, accepting contempt, letting the world treat him like trash. But this girl, this kind girl, was being punished for showing him humanity. That was different. Elijah could endure suffering for himself. But watching good people hurt because of him? His hands tightened around the spoon. A soldier's conscience, dormant for decades, began to wake. Elijah ate quickly, trying to finish before he caused Sarah any more trouble. But he could feel Marcus watching him from across the room, checking his watch every few seconds. 10 minutes until the general arrived. Elijah took another bite, then reached for his water glass. Wham! Marcus's shoe slammed into the leg of Elijah's chair, hard, deliberate. The table jolted. The plastic bag containing Mary's photograph slid across the surface and tumbled to the floor. The photograph spilled out, landing face down on the dirty tile. Elijah's heart stopped. He started to bend down, but Marcus was faster. "Let me get that for you," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false courtesy. He scooped up the photograph before Elijah could reach it. Marcus held it up to the light, examining it. The yellow dress, the young soldier, the bright smiles of 1965. Well, is this the missus?" A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. "Pretty lady? Real pretty? Please give that back." Elijah's voice was quiet, controlled. Marcus tilted his head, studying the photo like a curiosity. "Shame she got stuck with a loser like you. What happened? Did she wake up one day and realize what a mistake she'd made?" He paused, his smile widening. "Or maybe she's the lucky one, died just to get away from this pathetic—" Elijah's hand shot out like a striking snake. His fingers clamped around Marcus's wrist with a grip that made the younger man gasp. The photograph fell from Marcus's hand, but Elijah's other hand caught it midair, never taking his eyes off the manager's face. Marcus tried to pull away. He couldn't. The grip was iron, a steel trap snapping shut. Decades of soft living had made Marcus forget what real strength looked like, the kind forged in jungles and firefights and carrying wounded brothers through hell. "What? Let go!" Marcus's voice rose an octave. Elijah stepped closer. The trembling old man was gone. In his place stood something else, something harder, something that had survived things Marcus couldn't imagine. "You can insult me." Elijah's voice was low, steady, absolutely terrifying in its calm. "You can seat me by the toilets. You can spit on my money." His grip tightened. Marcus winced. "But you keep your filthy mouth off her name." The restaurant froze. Every eye locked on the homeless man in torn clothes, holding the well-dressed manager like a child holds a toy. Sarah's hand covered her mouth. Marcus's face had gone white. He could feel the strength in that grip, the strength of a man who'd once carried 3 soldiers through a mile of enemy fire, the strength of a man who was done being invisible. "She loved a broken man for 57 years, Elijah continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling the entire room. "She held me when the nightmares came. She never left me even when I had nothing." His eyes, those deep brown eyes that had seen too much, bored into Marcus's soul. "And she died with my name on her lips, so you don't get to mock her. You don't get to laugh at her photograph. You don't get to pretend you're worthy to speak about a woman who had more dignity in her little finger than you'll have in your entire life." Marcus tried to speak. Nothing came out. "Do you understand me?" Marcus nodded frantically. Elijah released him. Marcus stumbled backward, cradling his wrist, his face a mask of shock and rage and fear. The restaurant was silent. Only the hum of the air conditioning and distant kitchen sounds remained. Then Marcus found his voice. "Security!" The word exploded from him like a scream. "Get in here now!" The 2 guards came running. "This man assaulted me!" Marcus pointed with his good hand, voice shaking. "Get him out! Call the police!" The guards moved toward Elijah, their hands reaching for their radios. Elijah didn't run, didn't fight. He simply stood there, Mary's photograph clutched carefully in his weathered hands. Sarah rushed forward. "Mr. Chen, please!" "You're fired!" Get your things and get out, Marcus screamed. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. The guards grabbed Elijah's arms, tighter this time, professional, preparing for resistance. Elijah looked at Sarah one last time. "I'm sorry, child." The guards began pulling him toward the door. Elijah didn't resist. He'd said what needed to be said. He'd drawn his line. Some things were worth fighting for, even if you lost everything else. Mary's photograph was safe in his hand. That was all that mattered. Marcus stood in the center of his restaurant, breathing hard, his wrist already showing red marks. Around him, customers whispered and stared. The guards dragged Elijah toward the entrance, and outside, through the glass doors, a black town car pulled up to the curb. 3 stars gleamed on the shoulder boards of the officer stepping out. The general had arrived. Elijah endured every insult, every humiliation, every cruelty, until they touched the one thing he loved most. What is your non-negotiable line? Your family? Your honor? The memory of someone precious? Share your story in the comments below. The guards dragged Elijah toward the glass entrance, their hands digging into his arms. His boots scraped against the marble, leaving marks that would be buffed away within the hour, just like his presence, just like everything else about him. Behind them, Sarah stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "Move faster!" Marcus barked, following close. His wrist still throbbed. "The general will be here any second. I will not have this vagrant." The front door opened. A gust of afternoon air swept in. General Raymond Anderson stepped through, 3 stars on each shoulder, chest covered with ribbons, 68 years old and every inch a soldier. The guards didn't see him until it was too late. They collided. Not hard, just enough to throw everyone off balance. Just enough for the lead guard to yank Elijah's arm sharply aside. Just enough for the old frayed seam of Elijah's torn jacket to give way completely. "Righty!" Something tumbled from the inner pocket. Time slowed. Elijah's free hand grasped at air, but he was off balance, still held, still moving. The object hit the marble floor. Clink. A small velvet box, navy blue, faded. It bounced once, then skittered across the polished floor, spinning as it traveled. It slid between the general's polished shoes and continued another 3 feet before wobbling to a stop. The lid popped open. Click. A Medal of Honor spilled onto the white marble. The 5-pointed gold star caught every ray of light. The pale blue ribbon, faded, worn by decades, spread across the floor like wings. The entire restaurant froze. Marcus's mouth fell open. The guards' grips loosened. General Anderson stared down at the medal at his feet, the highest honor the United States military could bestow, lying on the floor like a fallen star. Slowly, deliberately, he bent down. His movements were reverent, as if handling something sacred. He lifted the velvet box, and that's when he saw it. Inside the lid, protected by yellowed plastic gone brittle with age, was a photograph. Black and white, creased, precious. 7 young men in combat fatigue stood in a jungle clearing, arms around each other's shoulders, faces young and unlined, smiles defiant against the darkness surrounding them. Behind them, palm trees, smoke, the wreckage of something terrible. Dated in faded ink, Mekong Delta, Firebase Charlie, May 1968. The general's breath stopped. His fingers trembled. 7 men, 7 brothers. He knew those faces. 3 were dead, killed within months of that photo. 2 had made it home but never recovered. 1 to addiction, 1 to a bullet from his own gun in '73. 1 had become a general, and 1... The general's eyes lifted from the photograph, traveling across the restaurant until they landed on the old man still held between the guards. Torn clothes, matted beard, weathered skin. But there, on the left side of his face, running from temple to jaw, was a scar. A crescent-shaped scar. The general's world tilted. He knew that scar. Had watched it happen. May 17th, 1968. A Chinese grenade, shrapnel tearing through his sergeant's face. Blood everywhere. So much blood the general thought they'd lost him. 4 hours holding pressure on that wound while waiting for a medevac that almost didn't come. But Elijah Thompson hadn't died that night. He'd gotten back up, grabbed his rifle, held Firebase Charlie for 6 more hours until reinforcements arrived. Alone. After everyone else evacuated. After the general himself, then just a green 22-year-old lieutenant, had been carried out unconscious with a bullet in his leg. Thompson had stayed and saved them all. The general stared at that scar, at those eyes, at the dignified stillness in the old man's posture despite everything. The homeless man lifted his head. Their eyes met. 57 years collapsed into nothing. The jungle roared back. Gunpowder and blood, incoming mortars, a sergeant's voice yelling, "Get down, LT!" and throwing his body over an officer too green to know he should have been scared. The general's throat closed. His vision blurred. The Medal of Honor in his hand weighed 1,000 pounds. Around him, the restaurant remained frozen. Marcus stood perfectly still, his face the color of old paper. The guard's hands had fallen away completely. Sarah's eyes were wide with something approaching awe. General Raymond Anderson, decorated hero, advisor to presidents, a man whose word could move armies, looked at the Medal of Honor, then at the photograph of 7 young men who'd gone to hell together, then at the weathered face of the only one still standing. And slowly, he lowered himself to one knee. Right there, on the cold marble floor, in full dress uniform, before a homeless man in torn clothes. The silence was absolute. No one breathed. The general's voice, when it finally came, was broken with emotion too large to contain. "Sergeant Thompson?" His hand reached up, trembling, and touched the crescent scar on Elijah's face, as if confirming this wasn't a ghost, wasn't a dream, wasn't some cruel trick of memory. "My God, Sergeant, is it really you?" Elijah stood perfectly still, Mary's photograph still clutched in one hand, his canvas bag in the other. His eyes, those deep brown eyes that had seen too much, looked down at the kneeling general. And for the first time in 15 years of invisibility, someone saw him. Not the homeless man, not the vagrant, not the trash to be swept aside, but the soldier, the hero, the brother who'd stayed behind when everyone else ran. "Sir," Elijah said quietly, his voice steady despite everything, "it's been a long time." General Anderson rose slowly from his knee, the Medal of Honor cradled in both hands like a sacred relic. His eyes never left Elijah's face, that weathered, scarred face that belonged to a ghost he'd been searching for since the day he'd woken up in a field hospital and learned his sergeant had vanished into the chaos of a war no one wanted to remember. 57 years, the general whispered, his voice thick. "I've been looking for you for 57 years. Elijah said nothing. Just stood there with Mary's photograph still pressed against his chest, his canvas bag hanging from one shoulder, his torn jacket exposing the white undershirt beneath. The general's hands trembled as he examined the medal. The gold, still bright despite its age, the ribbon faded, but intact. Then his jaw set with military precision. "Sergeant Thompson," he said, his voice gaining strength, "you will stand at attention." It wasn't a request. Elijah's body responded before his mind could process the command. 57 years dissolved. His back straightened, the arthritis forgotten, the years stripped away. His heels came together with a soft click. His arms snapped to his sides. His chin lifted. For the first time in 15 years, Elijah Thompson stood like a soldier. The general stepped forward. With trembling fingers, he opened the Medal of Honor's clasp. Then, with infinite care, he pinned it to Elijah's torn, filthy jacket, right over the heart. The gold star gleamed against the stained fabric and duct tape repairs. The contrast was staggering, the nation's highest honor resting on clothes that smelled of the street, shining like a beacon on a man the world had thrown away. The general stepped back. His hand rose in salute, slow, deliberate, perfect. Then he turned to the 3 officers who had entered behind him, standing frozen near the door. "Attention!" The command cracked through the Magnolia Room like a rifle shot. The officers' heels slammed together as one. Their spines went rigid. Their hands snapped up in salute. Crisp, synchronized, absolute. 4 soldiers in dress uniform saluting a homeless man in rags. The restaurant held its breath. Elijah's right hand rose. Muscle memory took over, the kind that lives in bones and blood and never truly dies. His hand came up sharp and clean, fingers together, touching the edge of his eyebrow. A perfect salute. For a moment, he wasn't 79 years old, wasn't homeless, wasn't broken by decades of being forgotten. He was Sergeant Elijah Thompson, United States Army, hero of Firebase Charlie, and he stood tall. Sarah's hand covered her mouth, but she couldn't stop the sob that escaped. Tears streamed down her face as she watched. Around the dining room, customers began to rise from their seats. One by one, they stood. Men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, people who minutes ago had watched this vagrant being dragged out and said nothing. Now they stood in silent respect. The salute held for 10 seconds, 20, an eternity compressed into a gesture. Then, with military precision, the general and his officers lowered their hands. Elijah's hand came down slowly, reluctantly, as if letting go of something precious. The general's eyes were wet. "At ease, Sergeant." Elijah's posture relaxed slightly, but the soldier in him remained, back straight, dignity restored. Then the general's expression changed. The warmth drained from his face. His eyes went cold, the kind of cold that came from a man who'd commanded troops in combat, who'd sent men into fire, who'd learned to make hard decisions without flinching. He turned slowly to face Marcus Chen. The manager stood frozen near the hostess stand, his face the color of old newspaper. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. The general walked toward him with measured steps, each footfall deliberate, controlled, terrifying in its calm. "You." The word was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "You're the manager?" Marcus nodded, unable to speak. The general's eyes traveled down to Marcus's wrist, the one still showing red marks in the shape of fingers. "I understand this man assaulted you." "Yes," Marcus found his voice desperate. "Yes, General, he attacked me. He grabbed my wrist. He threatened me. I was just trying to maintain standards in my establishment, and he became violent." Standards. The general's voice could have frozen water. He looked around the elegant dining room, then back at Marcus. "You have standards. Yes, sir, we have a dress code and he— This man, the general interrupted, gesturing toward Elijah, earned the Medal of Honor in 1968. Do you know what that means? Marcus stammered. I didn't know. It means he displayed gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. It means he saved the lives of 17 men, including mine. The general stepped closer. And you threw him out of your restaurant like garbage. General, I didn't know who he was. So if he hadn't earned that medal, it would have been acceptable? The general's voice was steel. If he was just a homeless veteran with no proof, you'd have been justified? Marcus's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You called the police? Yes, they're on their way. Good. The general's smile was predatory. Because I want to file a report. A crime against a decorated war hero. Assault. Public humiliation. Denial of service. He paused. And the illegal termination of that young woman who showed him the only kindness he received in this establishment. Sarah gasped. Marcus's face went from white to gray. General, please. I was just doing my job. Your job. The general looked at him with undisguised contempt. Your job was to serve customers with respect. Your job was to treat human beings with dignity. You failed. He turned to one of his aides. Captain Mitchell, I want the name of this restaurant's owner now. The officer pulled out his phone immediately. Marcus's legs began to shake. Sir, please, I have a family. So did Sergeant Thompson, a wife who died while he was living under a bridge because the system failed him. And you. The general's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, somehow more terrifying than any shout. You looked at him and saw trash. The general glanced back at Elijah, still standing at ease with the Medal of Honor gleaming on his chest. Then he looked back at Marcus. We'll see what the owner of this establishment thinks about your standards. Captain Mitchell held up his phone, face tight with urgency. Sir, I have the owner on video call, Mr. James Sterling. The general nodded sharply. Put him on speaker. The captain tapped the screen and turned the phone so everyone could see. A man in his 60s appeared. Silver hair, sharp eyes, expensive suit. He was in a car, clearly rushing somewhere. General Anderson, this is an honor, Mr. Sterling said, his voice tight with concern. Captain Mitchell just briefed me on what happened. I'm 15 minutes away. But I want you to know— Mr. Sterling, the general interrupted, his voice cold as winter. Your manager, Marcus Chen, just threw out a Medal of Honor recipient, treated him like garbage, humiliated him in front of your customers. The phone camera shifted as Mr. Sterling leaned forward. Is this true? Marcus? Marcus stood frozen near the hostess stand, his face ashen. Sir, I didn't know— You didn't know? Mr. Sterling's voice rose. You didn't know you should treat every customer with basic human dignity. You didn't know that a man's worth isn't measured by his clothes. Mr. Sterling, please. You're fired. Effective immediately. The words were final, absolute. And I'll make certain every restaurant owner in Atlanta knows why. You'll never work in hospitality again. Marcus's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall, his hand, the one with the red marks, shaking violently. No. Please. I have a mortgage. I have— His voice broke. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Tears streamed down his face, not the angry tears of a man caught, but the broken tears of someone watching their entire life collapse in real time. He looked at Sarah, still standing near the hostess stand. Her eyes were red from crying, her expression unreadable. Then he looked at Elijah, the homeless man he'd mocked, kicked, degraded. The man wearing the nation's highest honor on a torn jacket. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered again, this time directly to Elijah. "I'm so sorry." The general turned to the two police officers who had just entered through the front door. "Officers, I want to press charges. Assault of a veteran, denial of service, public humiliation of a Medal of Honor recipient." One officer pulled out handcuffs. "Sir, turn around and place your hands." "Wait." Everyone froze. Elijah stepped forward, the Medal of Honor catching the light on his chest. His weathered face was calm, thoughtful. He moved slowly, his boots making soft sounds against the marble. The room held its breath. Elijah walked up to Marcus, who stood trembling against the wall, waiting for the final blow. Arrest, humiliation, the complete destruction of everything he'd built. But Elijah didn't strike. He placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder, the same hand that had gripped his wrist like iron moments earlier. Now it rested there gently, almost paternally. Marcus looked up, confused, terrified, not understanding. "General," Elijah said quietly, still looking at Marcus. "Don't arrest him." The general's eyebrows rose. "Sergeant, this man—" "I know what he did." Elijah's voice was steady. "I was there." He turned to face the phone where Mr. Sterling watched. "And, Mr. Sterling, I'm asking you, don't fire him." The owner's image on the screen showed complete shock. "Sir, with all due respect, this man treated you like trash." "I know." Elijah nodded slowly. "But firing him is easy. Letting him rot in a cell is easy. It won't change what's in here." He tapped his own chest right below the medal. "It won't teach him anything except fear." He turned back to Marcus, whose face was a mask of confusion and desperate hope. "You think you're better than me because of your suit?" Elijah's voice was gentle but firm. "No, son. You're just poor in a different way. You're starving for something money can't buy." Marcus's tears came harder now. "I spent 15 years invisible," Elijah continued. 15 years being looked through instead of looked at. I know what it's like to be judged by what you've lost, instead of who you are." He paused. "But I also know that mercy can change a man faster than punishment ever could." The general started to speak, but Elijah held up a hand. "Let me offer something different." Elijah looked at Mr. Sterling on the screen. "Give him one more chance. But here's the condition. Every week, Marcus serves meals to homeless veterans. Not as punishment, as education. He needs to learn what service really means." Marcus's eyes widened. You'd do that for me? After everything I—" "Not for you," Elijah said quietly. "For the next person who walks through that door in torn clothes. So, you'll see them as human. So you'll remember that nobility isn't found in the rank you hold, but in the mercy you show." The words hung in the air like a benediction. Mr. Sterling's face on the screen softened. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Sergeant Thompson, you're a better man than most." "All right." Marcus keeps his job, on probation. "But he follows your conditions to the letter." Marcus collapsed against the wall, sobbing openly now. "Thank you, God. Thank you." Elijah squeezed his shoulder once more, then stepped back. The general watched this exchange with something approaching awe. He'd commanded thousands of men, had seen courage in 100 forms, but this grace in the face of cruelty, was something else entirely. "Sergeant," the general said softly. You always were the best of us. Marcus wiped his tears and straightened his shoulders. He walked over to Elijah, his expression no longer fearful, but genuinely contrite. Sergeant Thompson, he said quietly, you came here for your anniversary meal. Let me serve you properly. He gestured toward the window. Table 7, where you should have been from the beginning. He led Elijah across the dining room, past customers who still stood in respectful silence, past the crystal chandeliers that now seemed less important than they had an hour ago. Table 7 sat bathed in afternoon sunlight overlooking a small garden. Marcus pulled out the chair with genuine reverence, not trained politeness, but the careful respect of a man who'd learned something profound. Please, sir. Elijah sat down slowly. The sunlight was warm on his face. The view was exactly as he remembered from 26 years ago, when he and Mary had celebrated their silver anniversary in these same chairs. He carefully placed Mary's photograph on the table across from him, propping it against the flower vase. The sunlight caught her face, making her yellow dress glow, her smile radiant. We made it, Mary, Elijah whispered. Table 7, just like I promised. Sarah appeared with a tray, her eyes still red, but her smile warm. She set down the roasted chicken with herbs, perfectly golden, steam rising, the aroma like a blessing. For you, Sergeant Thompson, she said softly. Then she placed a second plate across from him, in front of Mary's photograph. And for Mrs. Thompson. Elijah's throat tightened. Thank you, child. Marcus stepped forward with a pitcher of water. His hands were steady now, no longer shaking with stress, but calm with purpose. He poured carefully, like it mattered. It is an honor to serve you, Sergeant Thompson. The words hung in the air, the complete opposite of what he'd said an hour ago when he'd called Elijah trash and ordered him thrown out. General Anderson approached. May I join you, Sergeant? Of course, sir. The general sat beside him, and for a moment they shared comfortable silence. Two old soldiers who'd survived hell together and somehow found each other again. Then the general reached into his jacket and withdrew a heavy envelope. He placed it on the table beside Elijah's plate, along with a single key on a brass keychain. The Army takes care of its own, Sergeant. It's late, decades too late, but it's yours. He tapped the envelope. A unit in the new Veterans Housing Complex on Ponce de Leon. 2 bedrooms, fully paid. Move in whenever you're ready. Elijah stared at the key like it was a foreign object. A home. A real home. Not concrete overpasses or cardboard boxes or shelter cots you had to leave at sunrise. A home. His hand trembled as he reached out and touched the key. The brass was cool and solid. Real. Not a dream. His voice broke. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You already said everything that mattered 57 years ago when you stayed behind and saved 17 lives. The general's eyes were bright. This is just the country keeping its end of the bargain. Elijah picked up the key and held it tight in his palm. He looked at Mary's photograph, her smile eternal in the sunlight. We have a home again. Sweetheart, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. A real home. He closed his eyes and felt the warmth of the sun on his face, the weight of the key in his hand, the smell of Mary's favorite meal in front of him. For 15 years, he'd been invisible. For 15 years, he'd wandered through a world that had forgotten him. But today, on their 60th anniversary, He was seen. He was honored. He was home. The Medal of Honor gleamed on his torn jacket, catching the sunlight like a promise kept. Around them, the restaurant had begun to move again, but the atmosphere had changed, softer, humbler, as if everyone present had witnessed something sacred. Marcus stood nearby, watching Elijah hold that key with such reverence, and he finally understood what service truly meant. Not perfection or image or the appearance of elegance, but the simple act of seeing another human being and treating them with the dignity they deserved. Elijah set down his fork and placed his napkin on the table. The meal was finished. The promise kept. He looked at Mary's photograph one last time in the golden afternoon light, then carefully tucked it back into its plastic bag and placed it inside his jacket, close to his heart. He stood slowly, adjusting the canvas bag on his shoulder. But this time, he didn't stoop. His back was straight. The Medal of Honor gleamed on his chest. General Anderson rose and extended his hand. "Sergeant." Elijah took it, and their handshake lasted longer than protocol required, the grip of brothers who'd walked through fire together. "Thank you, Raymond," Elijah said quietly, using the general's first name for the first time in 57 years. The general's eyes glistened. "No, Elijah. Thank you. For everything." Elijah turned and walked toward the exit. He stopped beside Marcus, who stood near the hostess stand, his posture no longer rigid with pride, but humble with understanding. Elijah didn't speak. He simply nodded, a small gesture that carried the weight of forgiveness. Marcus bowed his head in return, unable to meet his eyes. Then Elijah moved to Sarah. She threw her arms around him without hesitation. "Keep your light shining, child," he whispered. He released her and walked toward the glass doors. The two security guards who had dragged him out an hour ago now stood at attention. They pulled the doors open wide, their faces solemn with respect. Elijah stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight. The golden hour had arrived, that magical time when everything glows warm and soft. The city that had seemed so cold this morning now looked different. The same buildings, the same streets, but transformed by light. He walked down Peachtree Street, the key to his new home safe in his pocket, Mary's photograph pressed against his heart, the Medal of Honor shining on his chest. People passed him on the sidewalk. Some glanced at the medal and did double takes. Some nodded in respect. Some smiled. He was no longer invisible. "They say you die twice," he thought as he walked. "Once when you stop breathing, and again when someone says your name for the last time. Today, Mary's name was spoken with love. Today, I am alive." The autumn sun warmed his face. His worn boots, still held together with duct tape, carried him forward with purpose now. Not wandering, not searching through gutters for coins, going home. He passed a young mother with her children. She saw the medal and placed her hand over her heart, mouthing, "Thank you." Her children stared with wide eyes. Elijah nodded to them and kept walking. A businessman in an expensive suit, the kind who might have looked right through him this morning, stopped and saluted. Elijah returned it, crisp and clean. The city moved around him, but he was no longer a shadow moving through it. He was part of it again, connected, seen. He turned the corner onto Ponce de Leon Avenue, where his new home waited. 2 bedrooms, fully paid. A place where he could hang Mary's photograph on the wall instead of carrying it in a plastic bag. A place where he could wake up to sunlight instead of the rumble of traffic overhead. A place to rest. The Medal of Honor on his chest caught the light one final time, a golden star shining against a torn jacket, a reminder that true nobility isn't found in the clothes you wear or the money in your pocket. It's found in the promises you keep, the mercy you show, the way you treat those who can do nothing for you. Elijah Thompson disappeared into the golden afternoon, not as a forgotten man, but as a hero, finally coming home. Elijah found his way home. Marcus found his humanity. But how many other heroes are still sleeping under bridges tonight? If this story touched your soul, don't just watch, act. Share this video to honor a veteran. Subscribe to Justice Soul to join our movement spreading stories of mercy, justice, and redemption. True nobility is not found in the rank you hold, but in the mercy you show. Who will you show mercy to today?